Okay, so today's video is a little different from the usual topics of Python, data science, React, and full-stack app development, but it's actually still within the domains of data engineering, and to be honest, it's a very useful tool to have if you're working with data at scale. And I'm talking about Elasticsearch and Kibana. Now, there's a few ways to work with Elasticsearch, but probably the most common one would be through a containerization technology like Docker. So this video will take a look at installing and spinning up a Docker instance running the latest version of Elasticsearch, which as of this filming is 8.4.1, and also the latest version of Kibana. So I'm filming this somewhere at the end of September, so you'll probably see this video going up on the first week of October. Now, I do it because I was looking for such a guide, and I realized that a lot of the tutorials on using Elasticsearch with Docker is kind of dated, some on version 6, some on version 7, and I tried following them, and in a lot of situations that doesn't matter too much. But in the case of Elasticsearch running through Docker, so much things have changed, and so I thought to quickly set up a video maybe for someone else, not just for myself in the future, but also for someone else who's in the same boat or trying to get an introduction to Elasticsearch, trying to see, hey, is this interesting to my current project, or maybe an introduction to Docker, or to see a combination of both of them and get a grand, simple overview. Alright, so of course, if there is an interest in trying to learn more about Elasticsearch and Docker in general, then we can always flesh this out into its own series in the future, doing hour-long deep dive into Docker and going through step by step, exploring Elasticsearch and all of that. But this video will not be that though. I'm gonna keep it relatively short. It will just be a practical demo of getting Elasticsearch running in Docker and then setting Kibana up for it using the same Docker through this thing called the networking, Docker networking. And so let's begin with a simple explanation of what Elasticsearch is right from their website. So what is Elasticsearch? The short version is that Elasticsearch helps everyone find what they need faster, from employees who need documents from your intranet to customers browsing online for the perfect pair of shoes. But the more technical version goes a little bit more like that. So I'm just gonna give you the first line here, and then I'm gonna just dive right in and maybe explain with in more layman terms what Elasticsearch is fantastic for, what are the use cases, and I'm gonna maybe talk from that angle. All right. So Elasticsearch, let's look at a technical definition. It's a distributed, free, and open source. But here it says open search. It's kind of a play on the word open source. So free and open search and analytics engine for all types of data, including textual, numerical, geospatial, structured, unstructured data. And it doesn't just come with a search engine itself that you can implement. It actually comes with a set of tools, a suite of tools, if you like. And some people call it the ELK stack, the Elasticsearch, Logstash, and Kibana. So these are a set of tools that allow the engineer or the data scientist or the data engineer or whoever it is, right, to build a pipeline around data ingestion, enrichment, storage, analysis, and visualization. So it's actually a lot more than just a search engine. Of course, you can think of it at the very basic level. It does provide the functionalities of storing data, search, and analyze, right? So basically, how do you get data out from how do you get insights? How do you ask questions given a database? And how do you ask questions? And how do you get the answers? And how do you find exactly what you're trying to find? And they are dedicated to that, and you're thinking that, oh, can I not use a SQL engine to do that? Well, SQL engine is really good at querying, but what happens if you're trying to search for, let's say, a text? You're trying to find where, let's say the name is Samuel, but so maybe the first name is Samuel, maybe the last name is Samuel, maybe the middle name, or maybe in the home address there is that, or maybe in the email address there is that. What if I want to find anyone, whether it's the first name or the last name of search, or the email addresses, whatever it is, when I want to find the word Sam, for example, I want to return all the entry that has that. And if you try to use SQL engine for a SQL engine for that, you can achieve that result, but you're not going to get very efficient. You're not going to do it at a scale, at a speed that you need to. So from that angle, when people talk about Elasticsearch and you try to find explainer videos about that, you usually see terms like index. It's basically an index is a search engine, it's an analytics database, and all of that are partially true and correct, right? They're actually part of the appeal of what makes Elasticsearch great. And then from there, Elastic has actually grown, into this ecosystem of components that we see earlier, the ELK stack. And now they provide use cases just beyond just having a search engine. So if you're running an e-commerce store, you want to search for any customers who have made such an order over this time, over that time, you want to do queries and you want results to be returned to you fast, then you would probably need to roll your own search engine. And this is a free open source search engine that you can implement on your website, right? So from simple search on a website, document, collecting, analyzing log data is also another very common use case. If you're collecting a lot of log data and you want to actually have a way to query them, collect them, visualize them, and analyze them, right? You can also complement them with another business intelligence tool. There's a lot of those tools in its ecosystem, and I'll show you some of them later when we get to spin that up. So now that we get an overview of Elasticsearch, let's look at Kibana. And later I'll give you a very practical demo on how does it look like, and I'll inject some data, and I'll try to query some data as well using Kibana, and you see it later more visually. All right, but Kibana is a free and open front-end application that sits on top of the Elastic Stack, providing search and data visualization capabilities of data indexed in Elasticsearch. So more commonly known as the charting tool for the Elastic Stack, right? So the ELK stack. Okay, you see that word there. So it provides a UI, if you will. It provides a UI for you to develop some sort of custom visualizations in a web interface instead of trying to work through the terminal CLI and trying to do them manually or do it from scratch. Okay, I'm gonna close that out now, and I have my terminal open. I also have my Docker on the right, and so my terminal is on the left. I'm gonna maybe resize this a little bit, and I'm gonna zoom in so you can see this. Right, I'm gonna change to my desktop. And we're gonna start to work from here. So maybe resize this a little bit more so you can see the Docker container. I have Docker desktop running, which is actually not required. I could have maybe completely hide this out if I want to, but let's just keep it there. So currently in the containers, I have nothing running. I have a few exited ones. The Docker Elastic Redis, I have a few that I'm running, but they are exited, so there's nothing here. And actually, let's pull up our browser again. Sorry for that. Let's just go to Docker Hub just to see how do we find that, the one that we want, right? So you can go to hub.docker.com or just search for Docker Hub, and then within that, just search for Elastic. I believe Elastic would suffice. You should see like Elasticsearch and Kibana. You could do a quick search there, and it will show you that this is the latest version, 8.4.1, and a lot of tutorials are still stuck in 7.17 and 6.8, and quite a lot of things have changed. If you click on one of them and you just follow through that tutorial, you see that some of those things have changed, and I'll mention that. I'll point that out later in my video. But here again, to give you a quick explanation: Elasticsearch distributed RESTful search analytics engine capable of solving a growing number of use cases. All right. So how do you pull this image and how do you run that? Okay, so there are a couple of ways to do it here, and they already give you the link anyway, so you could pretty much just copy and paste what you see here. It does say here that how to use this image. Pulling an image requires a specific version number tag. The latest tag is not supported. So there's a few information that you wanna read up about this. I'm also gonna click on this one, and then from here, just search for Elasticsearch. So there's a few products here: Beats, Kibana, Elasticsearch. Just click on that one. And then it gives you this Elasticsearch, and here's the URL, right? Docker pool docker.elastic.co/elasticsearch, and then you just have to put in the whole thing here. So you could either just copy all of that and back in the terminal. So I'm gonna have to shrink this down. I'm gonna zoom out a little bit, and you could just go ahead and just do a Docker pool. Okay, so Docker pool is just a way for you to just obtain Elasticsearch, but not necessarily to run it or to start the container. Alright, so just doing a Docker pool, and when you do a Docker pool, you have to pass in the URL that you find. So that's docker.elastic.co/elasticsearch/kibana. So this is exactly what you get from here. So you have the docker/this. If you want a specific version, you could just put AMD 64 depending on your architecture, but this is good enough for me, and pretty much there's no difference. You see AMD 64. Both of them, they work. This also works on ARM 64. So if you don't know what it is, there's a good chance you could just work with this one. Just Docker pool, docker.elastic.co/elasticsearch/elasticsearch, and then 841. All right. Now again, when you just do a Docker pool, it's not gonna run. Docker pool is not the same as Docker run. Docker pool is just gonna pull it onto your host machine, but it's never gonna do anything. Depending on whether or not you have it on your computer already, this may take quite a while. It could take maybe up to 5 minutes, but because I've done that before, so it says pulling from Kibana/Kibana, it finds it. It says image is up to date for this one, so it doesn't try to do any downloading, right? But for you, because if you don't have it, then it would take maybe up to 3 to 5 minutes. Now let's actually try to run this. This is only just Docker pool. You could either do a run, but before we do a run, let's create a network. So let's do a Docker network. And we could say you give it a name. You could give it any name. I'm just gonna call it Elastic, and I'm just gonna say run. So already it exists, so I'm gonna have to remove that. And to remove that, you do Docker network, and then you say remove. And if you do a tab, you see that all of these different choices that you have. And the one I want to be deleting is this Elastic, and this is a bridge network. So I'm gonna say Elastic, and run that. Okay, so it's confirmed that. All right. So if you do a Docker network list now. You will see a few, but you won't see that anymore. Let me actually zoom out a little bit more, because otherwise you're not gonna be able to see all of this. maybe like this. And later on, we probably need more screen state, but right now it's probably good enough. And now we can safely create our Docker network. So let's do that. And then we say create Elastic. And now we have an extra one. And if you do a list, you see that there is an extra one now called Elastic. And that's great because we can now inspect that very quickly. If you want to make sure everything is working great, you can just do it inspect, and you can say inspect Elastic. You can also inspect container. So there's a lot of things you can do there. But you want to just maybe take a look and see if things this is again, the driver is a bridge, that's okay, that's correct, and so on and so forth. I'm gonna clear my screen now, and now let's actually run that. So if you take a look at all the images, so you have the docker.elastic.co and then /elasticsearch/elasticsearch841. So this is the one that we want to be running. So let's spin up a container, shall we? So say docker, and let's go ahead and say run, and here we're gonna give it a name. And here we can call it ES-demo02. We're gonna call it 02, and because I ran this example before, so the first time I had ES-demo01. So now I'm gonna call it demo02, and I'm gonna give it a network, because if you run it on a network, later you can have your Kibana speak to the same network when you run it in a different container. Alright, so I'm gonna have this first container, and it's gonna call ES-demo2. So ES stands for Elasticsearch, and then it's just demo, and I want it to connect to my network that I created earlier. What do I name it? I name it Elastic, I believe, right? So that's that. And then I want to map the port as well. So I want to make sure that the port here, I'm gonna map 9200 to the local to the container 9200. So that's the host machine, and I want to map the 9300 to the container 9300, right? So I'm gonna say 9300, and then I'm gonna give it a simple terminal, which is like -t, right? And what -t allows you to do is to create a TTY, so which is for you to see what's happening within the container itself. So I just put a -t flag there. That's a -t option, and then we're gonna just put in this whole thing in here. So we're just gonna copy all of that, right? And what are we gonna do? We're gonna just paste all of that. Okay, so this is generally how you run a container, right? You basically have an image. So out of the image, you put docker run, and then you put the image. So the simplest way, without any option, without any pod mapping, would just be docker run, and then you would do your name of the image. But because we're running a few options as well, we want the name, we want to run it on a network, we want it to run on with some pod mapping, and then we want the TTY, right? So we're gonna do that. And here I want to just be more explicit. I want to just say 8.4.1. That's because when I'm running demos, sometimes I have multiple versions of Elasticsearch for video purposes, and if I'm not explicit, sometimes you don't get the right version. So I want to be clear here that I'm running on that version. So I'm going to say docker run, name is ES-demo2, and then network Elastic, port, map the container 9200 port, map it to the local machine so that we can actually navigate to this if we want to, or we can have other services communicate with this through that port. Same thing here, 9300. Now, why do you have two ports? Because typically when depending on how familiar you are with Docker, or if you're familiar with computer networking, you may be wondering, what is the point of doing this mapping, and I'll explain that later. But also the fact that maybe some of you have never seen a situation where you had to do two times of port mapping from 9200 to 9300. Why do they have such an arrangement of using two ports, right? So 9200 basically in Elasticsearch, it's used for all kind of API calls over HTTP. So later when we make our API calls, this would include maybe things like search, when you're trying to search up a query, when you're trying to do some aggregation, monitoring, anything else that uses a HTTP request, when you do a GET request, a put request, anything of that sort, right? You're actually going to communicate through the 9200 port. So all client libraries will actually use this port to talk to Elasticsearch. So any kind of services that you spin up later, they're going to communicate through the 9200 port. Now, port 9300, that's a custom binary protocol used for communications between nodes in a cluster. So this is not very important right now, what is a cluster and stuff like that, but later on when you see things like cluster updates and master elections, nodes, when they join, when they leave, and you're doing things like sharding and shard allocation, then those are when you use 9300. Now historically port 9300 was also used for connections from client libraries, but this type of interaction is already deprecated from the official clients, and so if you're running one of the latest version of Elasticsearch, then that is no longer the case. So let's go ahead and run all of that. I'm gonna have to shrink the window down a little bit because it's taking up a lot of things on there, and I don't know, I'm gonna have to maybe bring it up like that, and this I can afford more screen estate, I guess. So see, the thing is, a lot of YouTubers who are more professional. I'm not professional here at all. I have a lot of things going on. I have sort of like 3 full-time jobs at the same time. Sort of, I have to run my consultancy company, Supertype. I have to run my data science education company, Algorithm. So I'm not a professional, but a lot of professionals, they have like 2 screens. So one external screen where they can read off a script, or where they can have some sort of holding some screens here. I only have 1 screen. I don't work with 2 screens. I don't know why people do that. So I don't have that. I'm not that professional. So I'm trying to manage my screen real estate here. But anyway, now we're done. Okay, so if all of this is successful, you see the following. This is a lot of information in here. And what we really need, and I'll tell you what we really need. We really need this section. Okay, this section. This is what we really need. So we need to scroll up a little bit. If you're running this with me in this tutorial, up to this point, we've seen 2 or 3 commands here, but this is really what you need, right? Elasticsearch security features have been automatically configured. Authentication is enabled and cluster connections are encrypted. Now, password for the Elastic user. Now, this is important. This one, you want to put them somewhere. You want to copy them and you want to note them somewhere. I'm going to copy that and I'm going to open up a notepad and I'm going to paste it onto that notepad. Okay, you won't be able to see it on my screen, but that's fine. In fact, this is so important that I'm just going to copy the whole thing here, and I'm just going to get in here and paste it into my notepad. You're not gonna see my notepad, but that's fine. That's where I hold some information as well. Okay, so this is where you have your password, you have your CA certificate, you have your HTTP SHA-256, that's your encrypted, knowing that you have the encryption all built into this already, and then configure Kibana to use this cluster. Now, it says here that this is valid for the next 30 minutes. This is quite critical because if you're taking any time doing debugging and stuff like that, you're trying to experiment, you're trying to go into interactive terminal and trying to poke around it, by the time it expires, this will no longer work. So you will need to generate a new one. Alright, you will need to generate a new one. In fact, the same thing happens here as well. For this new Elasticsearch nodes, it's only valid for the next 30 minutes. So this one here, it will work within 30 minutes. But a lot of times, of course, if you're doing a workshop, you're going to have students taking their time. You're going to have people trying to go into interactive mode and trying to poke around it, trying to understand what's happening behind the scenes. And those things are going to take time. So if the password expires, I want to teach you how to reset the password or how to get a new one. All right. Because here, at least in this screen, it doesn't seem clear how you get a new token. So I want to maybe at least show you how that is first. So if you're still following along, just copy that password, put them somewhere. You also know that, by the way, actually it does tell you how to do this. It says to go and reset that by going into the container and then go into bin and then do that and then set a -u basically is the user. So it creates a default user and the default user is going to be called Elastic. This is very important. You need to know what your default user is because you need to sign in with a username. And if you don't pay attention to the screen, you're going to miss that part very easily. So let's go ahead and maybe try and see how do we do this. What does this mean? Reset with bin Elasticsearch reset password. How do you do such a thing? All right, so I'm going to open up a second terminal here, and I'm also going to move to my desktop because there are maybe some files that some files that I probably want to get into later. I'm going to clear my screen, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to read the instructions again. So it's going to say reset with bin. Now, how do you get into this bin? How do you get into this in Docker? So if you're familiar with Docker, you know you can do the interactive TTY to terminal, right? So you can say Docker, and you can say execute. So exec, and then this is no longer demo 01. This is actually going to be ES-demo02 because you actually run this container as ES-demo02. In fact, you can verify that in your Docker desktop itself if you have that running opening, right? So you can see here that I have ES-demo02 and I click on that, it shows me the same thing in the logs and I can inspect that. I can look at some stats. I can see how much CPU is it using, memory usage. I can look at the network IO. I can see a lot of things. I can use the terminal right in here, but no, let's go back to logs. Okay, so we can verify that it's called ES-demo02, so I want to make sure the name is there, and I'm gonna click into that, and this is it, right? I'm just gonna lift the screen right here, and then what am I gonna do? I'm gonna say execute. Execute what? You still need to execute something. So what do you want to execute? So we want to go back to this and we want to say, okay, this is bin Elasticsearch. So the way you would do that is you go to user, and some of this, you sort of have to go in there, and sometimes you have to read the docs, sometimes you just have to poke in there and just sort of see what's in there. Or you just have to use your CD, just go in there and then CD all the way and find the bin itself. But I know, because I've done this demo before, that the bin is actually in this path. So even though it says bin Elasticsearch reset password, you need to append that with in fact, prepend that with user set share elasticsearch/bin, and then now is where you put the Elasticsearch. So let me spell that correctly: Elasticsearch and I'm gonna say reset, and I'm gonna say password. All right. So this will be using the Elasticsearch reset password tool, which is already available in the Elasticsearch, and it's available in the bin directory. So there is already a program in there when you spin up Elasticsearch. There is a program in there, and bin is just where you put all the programs, the binary files, put all of them in there. So let's go ahead and just try and do that. And then when you run this, it will ask you what user do you want to run this tool with. So you can't just run this like that without a user. So if I run this, see what's gonna happen. See what's gonna happen. It says no, resets the password of users in a native realm and built-in users, and it says error, missing required options, username. So it won't let you do that. It will need a username. So we also have to append with a -u, a u option, and then put in the name, the username that you want to reset the password for. So I'm gonna say elastic like this. And what is it gonna do? It's gonna say owner of the file used to be root, but now it's Elasticsearch. The password will be printed in the console. Please confirm that you would like to continue. So if you were to confirm and put a Y here, the tool will reset the password of the Elastic user to an auto-generated value. All right. So if you set up everything to be default, then the default username is going to be Elastic. But of course, if you have a different username when you initialize the Docker run, then you want to change that accordingly. So I'm actually going to say no now, because I just want to show you how to do that. Because what if the time, let's say some of these lapse, or you want to, for any reason, you want to reset a password, then that's when you can use this tool. So I'm going to say no. So I'm going to say no, user cancelled operation. All right, that's cool. And now what do we want to do next? Let's take a look at the instructions again. It has a security certificate, right? So what would be nice is to just maybe copy that into a local, because we can use that certificate, right? So let's just maybe do a copy. So if I maybe create a temporary file, I'm gonna say temp1 demo1, right? And I'm gonna say if that is successful, then I want to change directivity to temp demo1. Did not spell that correctly. Okay, that's because the first one, it was successful. So let's just change that. Let's clear all the screen. And what do we want to do now? We just do a quick list. There's nothing in there. Good. Let's do a Docker. Let's do a copy. And I want to just copy this. And here I'm going to change that. I'm going to say copy from this container. Within this container itself, go to user share Elasticsearch config certs, and then find this certificate, HTTP CA certificate, right? Take that, and what do you do with it? Just CP means copy. Copy that to where? To your local directory. There's a dot here. So that's kind of what it means. So let me just copy all of that. Let me just run that and then print ls. And now, sure enough, I see the HTTP CA-CRT. And I can maybe do a bat, I think. Just take a look at what you have there. And you see that there's a begin of certificate and you see the end of certificate. Right, so let's quit that out. If you know that this container is still running, and you know that by just either checking through your container, through your Docker desktop, just going back to Docker, just going back to your containers tab, and you can see all the running containers. You can see the status. You can see that it's still running. Or you can just make sure that you don't accidentally terminate this, right? But in any case, the fact that you know it's running and the fact that you now have a certificate, it means that you can now verify that you can connect to your Elasticsearch cluster just by making an authenticated call using this certificate that we just copied from the Docker container. All right. So how do we try that? We can use curl. It's very simple, and we just have to pass in a certificate, and that's how we do it. Here, do we need to change the username? No. And that's the local host. That's 9200. That's kind of what we explained earlier, right? Remember that in 9200, that's the port that we're going to be using, and all the API calls over HTTP is going to be done through this port, so 9200. And we map that. Remember when we first call it, we mapped the 9200 to the host machine 9200. So we could just do a curl, and we said the username is going to be this, and this is gonna be the port 9200. This is the port that we use for all API calls over HTTP. This includes search, aggregations, monitoring, anything else that uses a HTTP request. Now, when I first run this, it's gonna ask me to enter a host password for the user Elastic. Now, if you reset your password, you are gonna have to copy a new password, but I did not. So I still have my password up there in this window. So I'm gonna copy off that. So just gonna copy that, and I'm gonna paste this right in. And then it's not gonna show, but let's just press enter anyway. And if you're successful, you should see the tagline for search. So this is kind of the Elasticsearch tagline. It's a very VT tagline. You have the name, you have the cluster name, you have the version, and of course we're using the latest version of Elasticsearch, so we expect to see 8.4.1. And then you will have some information about the build Lucene version that's behind us. Under the hood, it's actually using Lucene. But okay, this is all good. Now, I also want to make a mention here because the fact that you see the word cluster coming up a couple of times here already. Now, when you first start Elasticsearch for the first time, the installation process configures a single node cluster by default. Now, this process also generates an enrollment token and prints it to your terminal, and this is where you find it here. So configure other nodes to join this cluster. All right. So this is the enrollment token. All right. But by default, the installation process is going to configure a single node cluster. And then it's gonna give you this enrollment token, and you're gonna print it to your terminal. You can copy that somewhere if you want. If you want a node to join this existing cluster, then start the new node with this generated enrollment token, right? And this new node could be something. It could be Kibana. It could be something else. And we're actually gonna use this to set up our Kibana. But if you want to create a cluster, and maybe when we go to something more advanced later on in the series, when we create a new video for that, it's not gonna be covered in here, right? Then you see me go into more details about how do you use such thing and how do you architecturally think about what a cluster is and stuff like those. Okay. Of course, I also want to mention that unlike your password is going to be there for until you change it, right? This is the password. It's not going to expire. It's going to be there. But this token, it's only going to be valid for the next 30 minutes. So if you are trying to, if you're dilly-dallying, if you're trying to tinker around with it too much and 30 minutes have gone by, then you will need to generate a new token. And how does it generate a new, how do you generate a new token? Well, it says here, under bean Elasticsearch enrollment token. So this is kind of familiar, isn't it? Because we actually gone into this and to change that. So it's very similar to the same process of changing our password. So it's also put into the bin, and so we know we could do a docker exec, and then we can do a -it. But now instead of that, we're gonna change this and we're gonna say, okay, Elasticsearch is still correct. So let's type that out. And now we know that that's bin, but now this is in Elasticsearch and then -- enrollment token, all right? Let's see if it tells you where to reset an enrollment token. If it doesn't, it's fine. I know how to reset that already. I just want to see if it's there. This tells you how to reset the password, but I don't think it tells you where to reset the token. But anyway, in any case, all right, it's just actually going to be Elasticsearch, and instead of -reset -password, it's going to be -create -enrollment /token. All right. And then here you have to put in what service do you want, and here we're just gonna put as option, and we're gonna say Kibana, and that is kind of how you generate a new token. I don't know if I want to run it, but let's just go ahead and run it anyway. And now we generated a new token, and you realize that this is not the same token as the one up there. And it's most obvious if you compare like the last few digits. You say this is a OXL VTVE, and there is no such string in here, right? Even though the last few ones look the same, IFQ is there, IFQ is there, EIFQ is there, but then if you compare to like the strings that comes before it, then it's different. So let's just I'm just gonna copy off this as well, because now that we create a new token, we want to use that token, and now we could run our Kibana instance. So instead of just doing docker pull, we're just gonna say docker run. And here we're gonna run, we're not gonna run the ES demo anymore, because that's just gonna spin up another Elasticsearch instance. We don't want that. Instead, what we're gonna have is we're gonna say -- name. We're gonna give it a name, and we're gonna go Kibana, and we're gonna call it 02 as well. So that's just gonna give it a name so we can identify the service, and we want this to connect to the same network. So we're gonna say -- net, and we're gonna say Elastic. So that's the name of the Elastic. And if you're not sure, if you're unsure about any of this, you just have to create another one and just say a docker network list, and you make sure that you find the right one. And here it's called Elastic, so we know that's correct. So we can close that out. And what else do we want? We want to actually map the port as well. So Kibana also needs to run on a port, and we're gonna map it to our local machine 5601. So 5601. And then let's just run that instance. Now, if you have it locally, it would be fast. If not, it's gonna pull from the from the Docker Hub or from Elastico. So I'm gonna just say docker.elastic.co/ I'm gonna say Kibana, and I'm gonna say Kibana 8.4.1. So again, the latest version as well. So here I have docker run, and generally you just say docker run and then the service that you want to run, right? So this is basically the name of the image. So docker run and then the name of the image, but I pass in a few options. I want to give it a name, so I could just refer to this name, and it's called Kibana 02. And then I want to connect that to to connect to the network, Elastic network, so it would sort of bridge these two separate containers together, right? So let's run all of that. It's gonna take a while, depending on whether you have that or not. If you don't have it, then it's gonna have to pull it from the internet, from from that remote and download that onto your machine. Okay, it says Kibana has not been configured. Go to this. Again, you see the port is 5,600.0.1. So the reason why you would have that is because you did the mapping, and you map it in here. Here you say take the container, whatever is exposed to the container in the container port 5,600.0.1. You take that and you map it so that anything that is in here would also be available on your host machine, which is your machine right now, 5,600.0.1. So it says go to this one to get started. So let's click on that, and it's gonna open that up, and you'll see that there is the configure Elastic to get search to get started, Elastic to get started. All right, so there's the enrollment token. Now, where do we have the enrollment token? We have it up here because we just did a reset. If you did not do a reset, then you just have to pass in the original one that it generates for you on initialization. But because we did reset, I'm just gonna copy the new one. So I'm gonna just do a copy. Then I'm gonna paste that in, and I'm gonna just say configure Elasticsearch. Actually configure Elastic. All right, and now it's gonna ask you for a username and a password. So username and password, the username, if you did not do anything at all and you're just following along this tutorial, just doing it step by step, then you know the name already. It's gonna be Elastic. And then what about the password? Now the password is basically, if you reset the password, you want to copy the new password, but I did not. I said no at that prompt. So I'm going to copy the old password. I'm just going to copy that, and I'm going to paste it in. You see that it's exactly the same one as you have there. And I'm going to click on login. And there we have it. So this is the Kibana dashboard, and it's connected to our, there are two containers running right now. If you confirm that by looking at your Docker desktop, you will see that now there is a Kibana, it's running, and these two are running. And you see that one is connected to the port. This is the port that it's using, 9,200 and 9,300, and then the other port is running 5,600.0.1. And you can sort of go into them and prompt, and there's a lot of things you can do from here. So for example, click into that, you can inspect them. This is how you know that this is the path. And this is kind of how it's very useful when you're doing debugging and the sorts. And you can look at stats, you can see how much memory it's using, how much CPU it's using. So okay, this is good. Let's go back there and let's follow through some of the guides. Now that we have everything set up, let's copy that. And I'm gonna click into, oops. Okay, let's take a look at this. So we have the add data. All right, so let's, right now, if I just show you this dashboard, there's really not a lot of very interesting things in here. If I click on the dashboard, there won't be anything, and you won't be able to play with anything in here. So you can add integration, and integration is really cool. So for example, in SuperType, in our machine learning data science development house or consultancy, I run this company called supertype.ai, and a lot of the times when we work with clients and stuff, we use a lot of Google Cloud, and we use a lot of Microsoft Azure. So if I wanted to connect with Google Cloud, I can just search for Google, and there's a ton of Google Cloud platform, and I can configure it, and I can connect with that. Maybe collect some audit logs from Google Cloud Platform and perform some sort of ingestion and do some sort of analytics on top of that, right? I'm not even going to go through all of this, but what I want to point you to is that on the left hand side, there is the analytics section, enterprise search section. So if you want to implement some sort of search, you can do that. Click on Elasticsearch and just choose a client, and then just follow through the guide. And maybe if anyone have questions on that, I could do a video on it in the future, but I'm not even going to talk about that. There is also security. We're not also going to talk about that, but what we're going to do is we're going to look at DevTools, and here we have some sort of sample. Right here, there is a simple, it says click the variables button above to create your own variable. So it gives you this sort of a click to send request, and you can basically click on that and you will return request. So if I run that right now, what's going to happen? So it says nothing, just took 0. There's nothing being returned, and there's no hits, nothing. And relation is the equal. It's trying to find anything equal to this, and there's nothing at all. All right, but let's go into the getting started, and it's gonna give us a few sort of tutorial, and we just have to follow through. Now the first thing it says, in order to make use of that, if I click on this link, right, I want to copy this entire string. So just take a right click or Control C or Command C, depending on if you're using a Mac or Windows. On a Linux or Windows, it's going to be Control C, and you want to click into this and do this. You want to take that and then paste it in here like this, and then you want to say save. Okay, so click on save, and then kind of links this up with your console. Very smart design for a tutorial. And then you can now just say view in console. So if I click on that, so what's going to happen is that it's going to populate this from here. So this is submitting an HTTP post request. So for example, imagine that you have a database and you're trying to post into the database, and every time you post to the database, you also want to post into your Elasticsearch index, right? So you're trying to post, first of all, you're trying to post a customer, and the customer name is John Doe, and so you're gonna just do a post, and this is how we post it. We're gonna click on run, and it's gonna say, okay, here it is. It's gonna put it into this index called customer, and then it's gonna say result, whether it's successful or not. If it's successful, you should see that because we're doing a post, it should be creating, right? And then it's successful, there's a 1, and then there's a primary term 1, okay? So we know that this is 201 successful created. All right, so let's get back here. This request automatically creates the customer index, adds a new document that has an ID of 1, and stores and indexes the name field. So one way it does this search really fast is through indexing, and it basically do a lot of that things for you in its engine itself. And we can maybe in a future video explore more about the design of Elasticsearch and talk about how smart it is, right? Now the new document is available immediately from any node in the cluster. So now any node that is connected to it could just do a GET request. And so all you need to do is to just, again, I can just view in console. And now instead of doing a post, you're going to do a GET request. Again, all of this is going through HTTP, and this could work from any node, right? Any node in the cluster could just connect to that. And of course, you need to make sure that you save this enrollment token. If not, you need to reset that and make sure that all the nodes have access to it. Anyway, let's run that. And what do we have? Now instead of a 201, you get 200. 200 okay means it's successful. It's successful in getting it, and so it finds the source and it returns the name, and it says that the name is John Doe. All right. And if you want to add data in bulk, you can as well. So for example, you could say do a put, and then let's say this is a bank, and then in a lot of account numbers, and with each account number there's the customer's first name, the customer's last name, the customer's balance, and you also see the customer's age, gender, address, and stuff, right? Generally, you write a script to do all of this. You wouldn't just try and copy paste like this, right? You would just write a script, or you would have a CSV, or you have a database or Postgre or something, and then you find an extension that sort of automatically add all of this into your Elasticsearch index. So anyway, let's just run this and say viewing console. And what is it gonna do? Okay, it's gonna generate all of that. Let's just click on that, run, and does it have an error? No, false. So 200 okay as well, successful as well, and this is basically submitting a following bulk request. And if you compare that to this one, this is using a post. So it's actually doing a post where it's creating, right? And so you have a different response code, and this is doing a put. So if there's any existing one, it would just modify and edit that. Now, the optimal batch size depends on the number of factors, the document size and complexity, but it stays a good place is to batch it into 1,000 and 5,000 to 5,000 document, and make sure that the payload is between 5 megabytes and 15 megabytes. So if you have a database with, let's say, 100,000 rows of data, and you don't want to have, you don't want to put all of them together. You want to spread them into different payloads. So each one of them would be between 5 megabytes and 15 megabytes, and each one of them would be between 1,000 to 5,000 documents. So it's kind of a more than a guideline and art more than a hard rule. Bulk data must be new line delimited JSON. So in this case here, you can see like there's a JSON format. Each line must end in a new line character, including the last line. So this is one document, and then this is the second document, then this is the third document. All right. Okay, and now that they're added to the index, we can now search them in almost real time, meaning it takes no time at all to search for them, right? To search for specific terms within the field, you can use a match query. For example, the following request searches the address field to find customers whose address contain mail or lane. So here I'm trying to find where the address contain the word mail or contain the word lane. And within this, right? So imagine this being a search engine. Now you're trying to find where the address, let's look at the address field, and it's within this field. So you have like 789 Madison Street, Bristol Street, Holmes Lane, Kings Place, Hutchinson's Court, Putnam Avenue, Baycliff Terrace. So you are gonna find anyone with where the address has contained the word mail or lane. Imagine, if you know anything about database at all, I want you to just maybe pause here and just appreciate the beauty of this, because imagine how would you do this in a MySQL or Postgre. Of course, you're also gonna get pretty good results by just doing a match. or using like a like statement. So you're saying finding where it's like, or maybe starts with or ends with and stuff, but they're really not built for that kind of purposes. They're built to store data very cheaply and allows you to query data if you know exactly what you want to search for, but not in this kind of search, right? And so let's actually go ahead and just do a viewing console and see how we get that. So let's run that, and then here you get the results. And by the way, if you click on history, you see all of this history, by the way. So if you wanted to see what you've created and stuff, and then you can just click on that, and you can also just modify them and then just apply as well. You can do all of that as well. But anyway, let's get back here to the search, and it will find you all of that. So it tells you that here, how many of them are there. So one of them, and then this one. And this is the hits. So how many hits do you have? So hits meaning successful finds, right? And here, this is the guy with the balance, the first name Amber, last name Duke, 32, male, which is kind of strange because this is a male, 32 years old male with the name Amber Duke. But who are we to judge? And then 880 Holmes Lane. All right, so that's the lane. So this is obviously all very, very simple, but you can construct them. And like I said, if there's an interest, this is kind of an overview video. I don't want it to be running too long, but if there's an interest, we can maybe dive a lot deeper into it. We can talk about how to construct queries and stuff, depending on how much interest are there in there. Okay. And then you can also maybe construct more complex queries. You can use a bool query, so Boolean query, to combine multiple query criteria. So for example, in this case here, this is a Boolean. You said that it must and it must not. So in this case here, it must match this. But then not anyone who is in the state of Pennsylvania, I believe PA. Is that? Or Philadelphia? PA state? I don't live in the US, so it's Pennsylvania, so I was correct. All right, so Pennsylvania. So this one, the following request searches the bank index for accounts that belong to customers who are 39 years old. So this is under the must. And you can have as many as you want. So notice that this is kind of an array, right? And in an array, you can have as many conditions as you want, as long as they're within the must array. But excludes anyone who live in Pennsylvania. So that's a PA. And again, this is also an array, so you can have as many as you want. So I'm just going to go and viewing console, and I'm going to just run that. And here, sure enough, you see the guy. And how many hits do you have? Only one. And the relation is equal. And then you have index, bang. First name is McGee, and then Mooney, and then 39 years old. And employees reverses. All right. Instead of constructing and submitting REST requests directly to Elasticsearch, you can use Discover to search and filter your data and get information about structure of of the fields and display your findings. Now, all of this will require you to sort of associate that with a data view, and I don't think I've actually gone into the data view yet, but you can maybe try to explore that on your own. But the Discover is going to be in here, right? And then you can create a data view, and then here you give it a name, and this could be you could be a demo Kibana. If you do a wildcard, right, this is not allowed as it says it's not an allowed index pattern. So you can't just have that because it's going to try and match everything. So this is, or it says rather it doesn't match any data streams. So what we can do is, if I want to match customer, I put C, and now it's going to match C customer, right? I believe this is a regex, so you could also try and put customer. But I don't think it's regex. Also, it can't be regex because it says the spaces and the characters here are not allowed. So you're gonna have to use the index pattern here, and let's just put a B. I'm just gonna say match anyone within the bank itself. All right, because customer is really just that one person, right? Bank, at least we have 10 rows. I think 10 records. So I think that's good enough. Let's just go ahead and let's say save data view to Kibana, and now we got it. So this is Discover, and Discover is really cool. Now I could search for file names. I could search for example, age. If I put A, it would filter for all of this that has A. So state, last name, first name, all of this contain the character A. If I search for AL, it would show me balance. If I search for LA, I would have last name and the balance. So I could maybe construct my query just by doing this plus, and then I would say, okay, find last name, and then the top 5 values immediately, even before I do any queries, is going to give me the top 5 values of the last name, and it was going to show me Harding, Mooney, McPherson, Ayala, and I can visualize them. And you can select that, you can take that, and you can maybe filter for all of the records that has this last name. You can do that. You can also filter out any records that doesn't have this last name, so the inverse of that. There's a lot of things you can do with this. You can create more data views in here. You can create more filters in here and maybe add your own custom filter. You can also use the KQL. So what is KQL? That's the Kibana query language. So you could use something like account number, and you can say account number is greater than. So I'm going to say greater than, and then I'm going to give it a value. So I'm going to say something like 20, for example, or 10, for example. And then I'm going to just go ahead and execute that. So to execute that, you're just going to have to run that. And now it's going to show you, now instead of 10 hits, it's going to show you 8 hits. So in total, there's that. Now I don't need to see only last name. I can see all of that. I'm just going to remove that. And now I'm going to see all of the records where account number is greater than 10. So so this is 13, this is 18, this is 20, this is 25, this is 32, right? So I'm going to get all of this. And then I could also take this and choose a display option. And I want to maybe have this fit into how many lines per row. I could change that. I could change this row height and stuff. So there's a lot of things you can explore from here. You can look at the file statistics, and it's going to show you some simple summary statistics. So account number, what is the distribution looking, address keyword balance. So this is the minimum, this is the maximum. 4,180 is the lowest bank balance we have among our customers. And then the richest guy in our bank balance database is 49,403. So we can get a sense of the summary statistics, just looking at the field statistics. And then obviously there's also the actions here. You can explore that in Lens, and Lens is just another tool here to sort of create charts and maybe find some new visualization tools and sort of like look at it as a donut chart. And then from here, you could also change that and slice them by different values. So in this case here, if you don't want to slice it by top values, you can slice them by a different thing. And you can also maybe choose it from right within this field selector. So you can say, I want to fill them by balance, for example. And then within balance, now you have a different donut. Okay, so Lens is cool. You know what's even cooler? You can actually go into the dashboard. So there's the analytics, there's Discover, Analytics, Canvas, Maps, Machine Learning, and Visualize library. So let's bring attention into that. You could actually save your work if you want to. If you want to save this, you want to explore this in Discover, Inspect, download a CSV, you can absolutely do so. I'm just going to go ahead and just click a save, and I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to say Lens. Okay, this is good. This is a simple visualization for demonstration purposes, right? And you could add this to any existing dashboard. I'm just gonna go ahead and create a new dashboard directly from here. So I'm gonna say new, and I'm gonna say save and go to dashboard. So this is gonna add this onto my dashboard, and it's gonna bring me right to it. So I'm gonna say save, and now this is a dashboard, and this is so cool, right? It gives you so much of this sort of interactivity with it, and you could go ahead and just create more visualization. And so how do you do visualization here? So let's go ahead and actually find let's find the balance. Let's take a look at the balance. I'm gonna drag and drop some fields here. I'm gonna drop the balance field. I also want to drop the state. Maybe I want to maybe visualize that. Maybe I'm really interested in that, right? I want to see when I compare let's say the balance with the state. I want to see like how does that break down? How does that distribution? How does that correlate with the state? So I'm gonna just do that. By the way, you notice that if I just click on each one of them, right, you see that they give me a quick distribution as well. If I look at gender itself, it says male is 60%, female is 40%. I can look at first name, I can look at employer, I can look at email keyword, city keyword, I can look at a few of this. So I'm going to first select bar horizontal, okay? And then now in bar horizontal, and there's a lot of charts here you can select. You have the bar horizontal, you can either see the percentages, you can see the stack, you can see the vertical stack. There's a few legacy metrics, and there is the area and stuff. Let's just take a look at the bar horizontal. And on the horizontal axis and the vertical axis, what do we want? Now, let's say on the horizontal axis, I want to have the state keyword. Let's do that again. So, horizontal state keyword, let's bring it here. We're going to drag, drop, remove that. And I'm going to bring the balance in here. Bring it here. So now what do we have? We have the top 5 values of state keyword. So Pennsylvania, Illinois, and I don't know, DEVA. Like I said, I don't live in the state, so IN. That's interesting. IN state. I'm just gonna open up a list of states, and IN is Indiana. All right, that makes sense. PA is Pennsylvania, I believe. LMNOP, yep, and IL Illinois, right? I don't know if I completely mispronounce it. I may have. And DE would be Delaware. All right. VA. VA would be Virginia or something. I don't even. Yeah, it's Virginia. All right. Sorry for that. Apologies for that, my folks in the US. I don't know. I'm not. I don't live in there. Right. So So now that you have all of the top 5 values of the state keyword, and then you have this, it give you a few suggestions, right? You could also look at the heat map, and now it puts, all of this into different values. You could also take a look at this, count this, but it probably doesn't make sense because it's word count this one okay, this is okay. But if you don't want bar horizontal, you could also have that as stack. You could have that as percentages. You could change this. So now you're seeing different sort of percentages, but now you're not looking at medium. It doesn't make sense. You want to see like maybe maximum or sum. If you want some visual options, you could change that. You could like hide that value, show the values. You could change the colors. You could add different layers to it. By the way, if you want to look at this sum, right? And let's say you have the median, but you actually want to change the function, and instead of median, you actually want this to be average. You could do that. So if you learn a bit of the the KQL, which is not very different from SQL, you could actually write your own function. So for example, in the quick functions, I don't actually find average. I don't, right? There is no mean, there's no average, there's the median, but there's the maximum, the minimum, but it doesn't really have anything else. So you could click on one of them and you could change that value. I'm going to say balance again, and then you could go into formula and you could change that. So in this case here, you could maybe for me, I know it's going to be called average, so I can type average. And if you do not know, then it's going to try to be helpful to you. It's going to give you a few suggestions. Here it's going to tell you that average is one of them. This is absolute value, this is add, and add you have to put in two parameters, the left number with the right number. So you could say average, and then you say add balance plus, let's say, I don't know, savings balance plus current balance, for example. I'm just gonna click on average because that's kind of what I want, and copy balance, put it back in here. So that will do. That is gonna be the average now, and I'm gonna name this to be the average. Name is correct now. I can change the colors, make it a little bit like that, and the axis I want them to be bottom, but you can also have them as top if you for some reason like it up there. All right. And that's kind of how you create something like a visualization or a dashboard. And you can create more dashboards if you want to. And you could, a lot of this stuff, right? You could save, you could return, you could save to library, you could download this as a CSV, you could inspect. So I'm going to just say save and return. And now I have two charts. And I just realized that I wasn't adjusting the screen, so you're not seeing a lot of what I was doing there. But anyway, I could add a title here, and I could call this my bar chart. And I'm going to save that, and here's the lens for keyword. That's also okay. All of this interactivity is there. So I could have different names. I could configure this view and change the lens. I could clone this panel, create another one. So I'll leave you to explore on that, but here we have our dashboard. We're going to just continue editing. I'm just going to save everything first, and I'm going to call it dashboard demo. So dashboard demo, and I'm going to say save. You could give it some text if you want to. You could call this simple analytics for bang. You can create a tag called bang, give it a different color, change this to this, pink, purple, and I'm going to save that. So it's going to give you the dashboard, and you can have as many dashboards as you want. And within this Elasticsearch itself, you could do a discover and look at all your data again. And again, from here, if there's anything interesting, you could always go ahead and just generate a chart directly from here using the lens feature. So you could click on account number, and you can click on visualize, and it's going to give you some suggestions. You can take this and you can add this to the dashboard. So I could say save this. I could also save this to the library, and I could add this to the dashboard after saving. Give it the tag that I just created, and this is a simple account number, right? For high net worth. I'm gonna say save and return. So now I have 3 views in here. And I can, of course, modify that to have this a little bit smaller, a little bit larger, if it doesn't make sense to have such a large one. So I'm going to change this to somewhere like that. I can move this up here, and I could clone this if I want to, change the name if I want to, and make all kind of changes. Make this a little bit smaller, move this up, right? I think that's kind of it. That's not a lot more. I apologize because for maybe the second half of the video I should have just made this full screen, but I did not. It was stuck in there, so I really apologize for that. But this is what we have so far. So I'm just gonna do a quick save here, and I'm gonna do a quick screen capture as well, and that's kind of it. So what else where do you go from here? Now that you know Elasticsearch, or maybe you've seen a tour of Elasticsearch and Kibana. Well, you can go ahead and learn about more about Kibana. You learn about the data views. You can learn more about the Kibana query language, the KQL. Just now you see how I changed from the median to the average, and you see that it would try to help you with the syntax, giving you some suggestions. There is, you can create some sort of some more functional, some more beautiful maps from your data. You could also try and learn more a little bit about Elasticsearch, learn about mapping, learn about how it indexes your data, and then how it helps you in improving performance for searching your data. How does it do aggregation in terms of summarizing your data as metrics, statistics, or any kind of analytics. So there's a lot more you can learn from there, but that's kind of a quick sort of a high level overview of how to set up Elasticsearch, Kibana, all on Docker. And maybe in the future video we're gonna dive deeper into what Elasticsearch is. I hope it's been fun for you, and I'm gonna see you next time. Bye.